and welcome once again to ITSS Verona's issue here. Today we have once again a real honor, a very big treat. Please welcome Dr. Oleg Goldshmidt from Israel. Doctor, welcome, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Michele. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is actually a huge, immense pleasure for us because today we are also launching the first issue on artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. And Dr. Goldshmidt is arguably one of the best people to have this discussion with. Dr. Goldshmidt has covered a number of positions in industry and in academia, and now he is a Chief Technology Officer for one of the most innovative cybersecurity companies in general, right? So once again, Dr. Todaraba, many thanks for being here with us. That's just very good. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor. And fire away.
Very good. So, Dr. Goldshmidt, we are hearing a lot of discussion, a lot of talk on cybersecurity, on how the world has to step up to this challenge and improve its cybersecurity. But let's actually take a step back. What is cybersecurity, and how should we actually approach it?
That's an excellent question, and I suppose that different people will start and end at different points. I personally tend to think in very generic terms about security in general and cybersecurity. Security is, of course, by definition, protecting something or someone from harm. Cyber has something to do with computers, and both of these parts are very general indeed. Security is obvious when you are thinking of a guy with a gun in front of a gate, but it is a much more general notion, and you can go as far as think of something like insurance that we all have, and that is something that protects us from harm in case we have a health problem, in case, God forbid, you die, you want to protect your family from additional hardship. If you are in a car accident, you may want to protect yourself from financial harm. And the same goes for cybersecurity, and the most immediate analogy to insurance would be a backup, right? And that protects you from loss of your critical data that has value for you, including protecting from things that like ransomware. Ransomware are programs that encrypt your important files and then hold you to ransom that you're supposed to pay in Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency. If you have a backup, you're protected from that because you can restore your data. And you don't normally think of insurance as security or backup as security. That's an integral part of it. And then, to me, the most important thing about cyber is that it is not limited to installing an antivirus on your personal laptop, or if you're in an organization, of having a firewall. Those things are actually very narrow corners of what cyber and computing is all about. You walk out of your apartment and you get into an elevator that's controlled by computers. You get into your car that has a bunch of computers that can be attacked, exploited, and elevators and cars and air conditioning in your building are things that can cause great harm to people. And when we go to factories that are practically always computer controlled, and utilities, power plants, for instance, just during the last week or so, there was an attack on civil and water infrastructure in my country, and there was another attack on a big port in Iran that shut it down for a day or so. those are physical things that are controlled by computers. And when you think of security, even at the level of national security, your electrical grid, your water infrastructure, your critical industries, to say nothing of nuclear plants or military installations, should be protected. And computers control today practically everything. So cybersecurity is an integral part of the overall security posture, shall I say, on a national level, on an organizational level, and on a personal level. And what you need to think of in very general terms is, what do you want to protect from harm? That's the purpose of your security. Whom you want to protect from? What are the threats? And what are the vulnerable points? Right? What are the weak points that are likely to be attacked? And then you essentially manage your risks by thinking both of the vulnerabilities and of damage that may be caused. And it's usually a rather complex story and not very obvious until you get used to thinking about it. And that's a challenge. And one other thing that I would like to add, which to me is also an integral part of security, and that concerns each and every one of us, is the notion of privacy. We all have secrets. We all keep secrets. And the reason that we are reluctant to tell those secrets to the whole world and publicize them is that intuitively or consciously, we think that disclosing those secrets will cause harm to ourselves, to our near and dear, to someone else. So privacy to me is a part of general security, and that goes into your personal information, into protecting your communications, into each and every one of us talking to our doctor, our bank, our lover or partner over video, over internet. Those are things, just examples of things that we don't necessarily want to make public to the whole world. So somewhere in the back of everybody's mind, there should be a thought of security here. And the last thing that I will mention in terms of how you think about security and what it entails is that security creates problems. It would be great to just do whatever you want without any additional thought. It would be very nice, but you need to remember your password when you go to your bank site or Amazon or something like that. And maybe you need to think twice before you post your intimate pictures or just upload them to the cloud, which is essentially someone else's computer, controlled by someone else and not you, and also possibly vulnerable to some kind of attack. So privacy and security are parts of the same picture, and that concerns each and every one of you. Organizations have resources, organizations have staff, seasoned professionals who do security. Each and every one of us needs to take care of himself and his family, his near and dear.
Thank you very much, Doctor. One thing. So, given everything that you said, right? So we can definitely see how cybersecurity is important, and what are the most important principles according to which we actually approach cybersecurity. What are the current, or more of the current and the future challenges within the field, in your opinion?
Great question. I suppose I will divide it into two parts. One is cybersecurity, computer security is getting not just more and more important, but absolutely essential. The world evolves, and the old-fashioned services where you physically went to your bank's branch and talked to a teller who knows you personally, those things disappear. They disappear for all sorts of reasons. They disappear because the technology is deemed good enough today and wasn't 20 or even 10 years ago. It disappears because it is cost saving on the part of service providers at various times. And you are basically forced to do things over computers that you didn't do 10 or 15 years ago. And you're forced into using, say, smartphone apps of various sorts. And when things need to be secure or private, that's an interesting situation to be in, because our smartphones are extremely useful devices, but they are also widely used and exposed by various actors, companies like Google and Apple and Microsoft and Facebook and Instagram, that we use, that actually create those smart devices, and they are capable of accessing everything that exists on them. So the security of your personal and professional communications and data becomes of paramount importance, because today you basically can't avoid using computers for so many things in life that it really what was important about 10 years ago but was often neglected today becomes a necessity. And there are many aspects to this. Various digital services appear by the thousands practically every day, which means that, among other things, they're not created by a small elite society of very experienced and very careful professionals. They are rather created by an awful lot of people who are under tremendous pressure of doing more stuff in less time, which means that security may not necessarily be fully integrated in all of the digital stuff that we use. And that is the changing world of ours. But the challenges, the basic fundamental challenges of security, in my mind, remain the same, if you will, on a fundamental philosophical level. Things change and change very fast, but the fundamental principle is actually economic. Security costs. Security costs in money, security costs in personnel that you need to hire, train, and pay. Of course, you need to acquire tools from security vendors. Those tools cost money. But most of all, security is also, as I said before, it prevents you from doing things, right? It interferes. And you cannot really have a movie kind situation where two people need to turn a key simultaneously to launch a nuclear missile from a submarine for everything that your organization does. It will be completely impractical, even though it probably would improve security. So there is a fundamental trade-off and challenge here. But the basic economics of cybersecurity is heavily stacked against cyber defense and in favor of cyber attackers. Attack tools are readily available, even if you don't need to create them yourself. You don't need to be some kind of a master computer expert to attack someone. You can buy them for peanuts in some darker corners of the internet, and they are even freely shared. And attacks are easy to repeat, they're easy to automate, and most of the time they carry very little risk for an attacker. Unlike attacking, defense is very difficult. You need very highly experienced and qualified professionals who need to invest a lot of time and effort in configuring your defenses, and they cannot really make a single mistake. A repeatable, automated, large-scale attack will find that single mistake that you missed. It is not enough to have a guy with a gun in front of the main gate if there is a small door in the fence around the corner from that main entrance, and you forgot about it. And security defenders spend their lives under enormous pressure, and they know that, and they chase alerts that are not always real, which leads to a big problem in cyber defense that is called alert fatigue. Too many things happening that sound like a breach, and it is not, and then you lose your concentration. And then whatever you do and whatever tools you deploy and however good your security team is, people make mistakes. People click on a dodgy link in an email. Some night security guard may plug a USB key to watch a movie at 2 a.m. And the CEO of the company may return from a trip where he connected to some Wi-Fi in a third world airport or hotel, and then the laptop is brought into the organization. So that is the big challenge, the economics. And this is what keeps me busy, in particular, how you turn the tables. And there are ways to turn the tables, but those are completely different topics. So there are novel directions in cybersecurity that may, the whole purpose of which is make defense easier and that's cheaper, and attacking harder and that's more expensive. So I'll probably stop here in terms of general challenges. They are very, very generic, and the specific technological things are all manifestations of those basic things.
Thank you very much, Doctor. You have opened a lot of windows, and a lot of them are actually like very, very interesting and fascinating, and should probably require even more of your time. But for the time being, I'm going to ask you one last question about the potential connection, if you see one, obviously, between cybersecurity, restrictive measures, and the COVID-19 related crisis.
Oh, what a great question. There are connections, plural, and they are not just potential. They are real. They are completely, they're here. And I will just mention maybe 2 or 3 things, and the list is very, very long. So the whole world has been on lockdown. And that meant, and still means, that many organizations that were used to working in offices, factories, and so on and so forth, went to work remotely. Working from home in some countries, smart working, I think it is called in Italy.
Yeah.
And just imagine what happens if you are responsible for security in a sizable organization. Let's say you have a few thousand people, out of which just, let's say, maybe a few dozen or a couple of hundred were used to working remote. Some of those may have been IT personnel, maybe some salespeople, maybe some executives. those are the people who normally connected security to the office. And now you have your whole organization sent home, and now you need to somehow guarantee that all of them will be able to smart work remote. And you start scratching your head and thinking, wait a second, does my secure infrastructure that was designed and maintained for a small number of people, is it even able to handle a couple of orders of magnitude more? That's first thing. Secondly, okay, the people who work remotely today, they use company-provided laptops that they take on trips and so on and so forth that were installed and configured and are maintained by professional IT and security personnel. Now, there is no way I can source and install and deliver to everybody in my organization thousands of computers to use during lockdown and short notice. So what they still need to work. Are they going to work from their home computers? They are not as well maintained. They probably have all sorts of malware there. And so what am I going to do? If they are compromised and I give them credentials to use for my secure infrastructure to connect to the office, which is something they never did, what does it mean for my security? How experienced are all the people in my organization that need to connect remotely? Not very probably. I need to train them. How am I going to do that? How am I going to communicate with that? There was just this morning, I read an article about a high-tech company that did an experiment on their technology personnel. They sent them an email saying, oh, you need to install this on your laptops to upgrade, and that's a security feature. And about 20% of them did. And it was just an experiment, right? And those were engineers. Those were highly experienced people. 20% is a great result. But actually, you need only one to be breached, right? And all the remote communications, we are talking on Zoom now, and lots and lots and lots of people were talking to their colleagues, to their families, to their friends, to their lovers over Zoom. And Zoom is known to have serious security issues that they are working to address. But when you think of security, you need at least to be aware of that and then take a conscious weighed decision on whether to use it or not. And you may very well decide to do that. Certainly, we are doing it right now, but it's a consideration. And that reflects on privacy and everything else. And then the last thing, okay, so now we are more or less almost out of lockdown. Hopefully in a few weeks we will be. But now we are probably going to see a sort of an arms race for, say, a COVID-19 vaccine among medical and biological labs, universities, pharma companies, countries. That has already started, and that's those are people who are after intellectual property, after data, but that also may have operational implications, just like shutting down a factory, maybe, right? And if you have a biolab, they probably do experiments. What happens if something actually disrupts the equipment and things get out of hand somewhere? That's a big operational concern on top of someone stealing data, algorithms, formulas, or whatever it might be.
Thank you very much, Doctor.